Hey, thanks for checking out another episode of the Identity and Influence podcast. On this particular episode, Dr. Mo and I talk through identity scripts, internal narratives that prevent us from leading and impact our leadership. So, hope you enjoy. Thanks for checking it out.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Rising Tide Leadership Podcast, Identity and Influence, where we simplify the complexities of your leadership journey. My name is Mo, and I'll be sitting in the host chair today. And with me, as always, to talk about leadership lesson number 20, what prevents you from leading, is Dr. Lemusita. What's up, brother?
Yes, sir. Thank you for having us on the show once again. I'm looking forward to Well, I always look forward to our conversations, but really looking forward to sharing this lesson today. So thank you.
Why don't you tell the audience what was the inspiration behind what prevents you from leading?
So we've called this particular podcast Identity and Influence, identity being about the self and who you are, and influence is the kind of the leadership part of things. And this is probably a leadership lesson that tends to lean more on the identity stuff, but in light of leadership. So it's the thing that frames leadership for me. And so, yeah, the internal narratives that we have, the identity stuff that's happening on the inside, the invisible things going on that other people can't see. What prevents you from leading? What are the barriers to leadership? So that's what we're talking about today.
Let's talk about why leadership just isn't about skills. And you've said that leadership isn't about teaching principles. Why do you emphasize the lies that people believe over the leadership techniques?
Yeah. I love how we record these, but they all connect to things that we've talked about already. And so we talked about, how in education it's knowledge, skills, and disposition. And this little lesson is more on the disposition side of things, right? So you can have all the knowledge you can have all the knowledge, you can have all the leadership techniques and all the principles, but none of it will ever work if the internal narrative about who you are is I'm not a leader. And so if that internal narrative keeps telling you that you're not a leader, no matter how much leadership techniques and principles you're never going to lead because the internal monologue, the internal narrative for you is I am not a leader. So those lies overshadow the knowledge. And I think leadership takes courage to confront the internal narratives and the humility to become and grow and develop as a leader. So that's what this lesson focuses on. What's the stuff going on the inside?
In the article, there's a student who asks you to, you know, teach pretty much to leadership and, what you teach on leadership. You
Yeah.
redirected the conversation. And
Yeah.
why was that important for you to do?
Yeah. So at the time I was in charge of a leadership program, and I had, you know, I think at that point, 30 or 40 students in this leadership program at different levels. You know what I mean? So the first year, second year, and I think I had the third year at this point when I had written this. So there are about 40 people in this program. And, a student asked me about, well, what do you teach in leadership? And I always start with personal foundations for leadership development. That's the first class. If you're not solid in who you are, then it's going to be hard for you to lead. One of the main principles for me is you lead out of who you are. But if you haven't spent any time, uh, understanding who you are and figuring out who you are, then you can still lead. You just aren't leading out of who you are. I don't think you're leading out of your true potential. So yeah, the student just wanted to learn leadership principles and stuff. And I said, leadership starts with that internal strength, the security in your identity, and you're only strong externally as you are internally. And so most people see strong leaders being extroverted and upfront, but they've done some work on the inside to get them to that place.
So, of course, it's internal. And you talk about invisible barriers. What are those invisible barriers to leadership?
Yeah, so the invisible barriers are identity narratives, or no, sorry, internal narratives, identity scripts, your character development. It's stuff, family systems, it's stuff about your personality. It's just a combination of all of those things. And then What are some of the things that you say to yourself? What are some of the things that people say to you that you keep going on in the back of your mind that prevent you from leading? So those are invisible barriers.
Was there a lie that you told yourself that you had to confront before you could truly lead? Like in your past, is there something that you can point to?
Man, I'm yes in my past, and I'm still working through those, even as I mean, even today, like I'm just working through like some of those scripts myself. But the fact that I wrote this article tells you that I'm aware of this concept, this idea that your internal narratives sometimes can be a barrier to your leadership. But the strong, but but some of the ones that I've confronted is I'm too young, or I don't have enough experience, or I've never done this before. Why would anyone follow me? Or, I mean, the big one is like, I won't be liked if I lead, because like
Yeah.
we place too much emphasis on what other people say about us. But those are all internal things that prevent us from stepping into leading. That's the stuff that we're talking.
So in the section called Identifying the Lies,
Yeah.
you name those lies. And with what you just mentioned, are there common lies that you've heard students or young leaders use and have those changed over the years? What are they today?
Yeah, I mean the biggest one is that they care too much about what people think of them. But like typically I'm not good enough for this. I'm not old enough. I don't have enough experience. Why would anyone follow me? I'm not popular enough. Like that's for somebody else. Like it's all excuses. I'm not a public speaker. Some people have this concept of a leader being like on stage, up front and extroverted, and they're introverted. You know what I mean? And so then they have that barrier to leadership
Right.
because leadership is being in front of people, but there are all kinds of ways that an introvert can lead. And so it's just all those internal narratives and identity scripts that we have that prevent us from stepping into leadership roles. But the biggest one is probably, like what will people say about me? Like, they care too much about what people might think about them. Like that's a big one.
Why do you think there's so many young people that think that they're too young to lead? Or even for somebody who's not young, they might be a little bit older and they just say,
Yeah.
I'm just not ready to lead.
Sometimes it's true. Sometimes you're just too young. Sometimes you're just not ready. And that's okay. But that's the whole point of this article. How do you work through your internal narratives about leadership and then step into that role? So like, yeah, if that's the excuse, great. And it might even be true, but how can you work through that and how can you step through those internal narratives and move into leadership roles? I think that's what this article is really wanting to challenge people to do. So yeah, sometimes those excuses are excuses, and sometimes those excuses are true. You might be too young. You may not be ready. But what are you gonna do to get ready?
So if some people really are too young or they're not ready, how do you know whether it's a lie or if it's a legitimate concern?
Right. So one of the first podcasts we did for identity and influence was around the competency model, and one of the stages of competency is you're unconsciously incompetent. So when you're unconsciously incompetent, you don't even know that you're incompetent, right? So if it's an internal barrier and maybe you haven't done anything about it, maybe you're at the point where you just cannot see it. So one of the stages is you just can't see the lie. You cannot differentiate between the lie and a legitimate concern, right? And that's okay. Like I said, it's one of those stages, unconsciously incompetent. But you don't just stay there. The next stage is when you're conscious about your incompetence. And typically it's somebody that points that out for you. Typically a mentor or a coach or a friend or somebody, if you're willing to listen and if you have the humility to take on some mentoring and some coaching, maybe you can move into that second stage, which is to be conscious about your incompetence and then move into conscious competence and then get to the point where you're consciously competent and you're not even thinking about it. But there are stages to development. There are stages to competency. And at the first stage, you just don't know what you don't know.
So where do these lies come from then?
Man, they come from everywhere. One of my ideas is that everything forms. And so it starts somewhere, but then if you stay in the same situation, it continues to strengthen that lie or continues to strengthen that internal narrative. And so you can pick it up. Typically, you pick it up from family, some parents, an uncle, like people close to you that say something to you, and then you create this narrative in your head that you're too much, or you're not enough, or you're not good enough, or you're too emotional, or whatever that might be, right? Which prevents you from leadership. And then it's confirmation bias, right? Like you just if that's what you think, then in everything that you do, you're just gonna kind of see it. And part of it is just breaking through that identity script. But yeah, society, it could be a book that you read, somebody that said something to you, or a documentary, something in a book, anything that everything that you do forms you, and like you can pick up some of these lies from all of those things. But that's part of the work of figuring out what these identity scripts are, and then just trying to recreate and rewrite new ones.
So somebody's out there thinking, I need to start identifying these lies. How
Yeah,
do they do that?
man, a lot of the same things that we talk about every episode, right? Reflect and evaluate leadership practice. I mean, if you're watching this podcast, once again, like we're already breaking down leadership principles for you. We're breaking down your identity and influence. And so like you're already there if you're listening to this podcast, but read books. Most important is probably get a mentor or get a coach, have somebody walk alongside you, have somebody that or ask people that hey, I'm trying to figure some stuff out. What do you see in me? Like I'm trying to figure out what my internal narrative is or my identity scripts that prevent me from leading. What do you see? Especially people that you live with, people that have known you for most of your life, like they can see things that you can't see. And so that's just really helpful to have people like that. And if you want to start identifying your leadership lives, talk to the people that are around you. They'll definitely help you.
I have a lot of people come to me and say, Mo, I'm not cut out for leadership.
Yeah.
How do you deal with
Yeah.
that? What's the process?
If they're asking that question, I ask them why. Why are you not cut out for leadership? And then listen to their answer. And then figuring out if there's a lie in their programming or if it's true, right? If they're not cut out for it, find the thing that they are cut out for. If they're not cut out for leadership, then that's awesome that you figured that out. Let's figure out where we can plug you in. Or maybe you just have a definition of leadership that doesn't fit who you are. Let me help you with your definition of leadership. Or like we're talking about in this particular podcast, what are your identity scripts that prevent you from moving into leadership? Let's work through those. How can we work through those to get you to the point where you think, okay, I can do this?
So how do we reframe a lie that's deeply rooted? Something like, I'm not qualified.
And if someone says, I'm not qualified, then the response is, let's get qualified. That's it. You know what I mean? If
Yeah.
they don't want to do, and here's the deal. If they don't want to do the work to get qualified, let them go. That's okay. They're not ready. And I'm okay with that. I really want to, I mean, it's a lot easier to work with somebody that's willing, and I really want to work with people that are ready to go. But if somebody is wanting to do the work to get qualified, then let's go. Let's get qualified. Let's help you get better at the thing. But, like they have to have that desire. They have to have that want, cause I'm not gonna I mean, it'll be a waste of time for me to help somebody that doesn't want the help. Just cut them loose. But yeah, let's get qualified or cut them loose. They're going to fit somewhere in there.
So we're talking about all these theoretical people. Is there someone that you've actually worked with to get through that internal doubt so that they could step up and lead?
I mean, there are a lot of examples. The first example that came to me was a student that I had who was kind of lazy, but he was very smart. He just wasn't motivated. He was actually one of my students and I was teaching a youth ministry class. So he was a youth ministry major, right? And he wanted to be a youth pastor. That's what he wanted to be. And he took a philosophy of youth ministry course with me, and we started talking through some philosophical foundations, and we talked about some deeper stuff, which really sparked his interest. And And he goes, "Hey, I'm really into this, right?" And once we were able to spark that interest, it lit them up, and then they became unstoppable. And so then they were like, "Yeah, I'm not going to be a youth pastor." And I'm like, "That's great." You know what I mean? Because that's not who you are. Because we were talking through some stuff and I was willing to challenge him on some stuff. He's like, "Yeah, that's not who I am. I'm going to pursue this." He went on and pursued a master's in philosophy and consequently got a doctorate. And now he's a professor at a big time school. But like it all started with and he wanted to be a youth pastor, and challenging him like, "Oh, I just want to be a youth pastor because that's, what I want to be." And all of his internal narratives, was keeping him lazy. And until somebody challenged him, he didn't want to do any of that. Now I have countless stories of just kind of helping people process through that. But the idea is if you can find that spark in someone, if you can connect that, that whatever it is that they're made for and leadership, you know, that's the work, right? What is it that's going to spark them and make them unstoppable? We talked about that in a previous episode about like finding their obsession. Like if we can help them figure out what they're obsessed about, then that's a superpower. It's turbo boost for like their motivation. So yeah, there's a lot of stories about helping people figure that thing out.
So you played a pretty integral part in this kid's life. And like you said, there's countless others. So how does mentorship or community play into overcoming the internal narratives?
So when I think about that, the first thing I think of is sometimes your community got you in that place in the first place, right? Sometimes your chosen community and people that you hang out with keep you lazy and they don't challenge you. So you got to keep that in mind. Maybe this particular community was the one that gave me that internal narrative or that identity script and told me that I wasn't good enough, right? So if that's the case, then you need to get out of that community and find a community that's going to help you grow and help you challenge those narratives, right? People, we tend to lean toward what's comfortable or easy. And if your community does that for you, then find a new community. Find a community that's going to challenge you and walk alongside you and be with you in the challenge. Now, you can overcome with the help of your community, but just keep in mind that your community can also keep you stuck. So I think that's the question, right? Is your community keeping you stuck in your internal narratives? And if it is, then find a new community to help you overcome your internal narratives. Yeah, you're in the place that you're in because of the people that you've hung out with and what you've done. And if you're feeling stuck, then you definitely need to change your community.
How can somebody know when they're actually ready to lead, even if they're still having doubts?
You're never ready to lead. You're never like you can't know everything about a job. You can't know everything about a position. You can't know everything about a leadership role because you're leading people. And if there's people, it's gonna not be perfect. You know what I mean? Like the theories and the books like lay it all out in the perfect world. And when you're working with people that are imperfect, it's never gonna go that way. So you're never gonna be fully ready, but you can be ready enough, right? So if like, your question was, how can someone know that they're ready enough? Back to the unconsciously incompetent. Maybe you don't know that you're ready, right? But trust the people around you. And back to what we were saying, trust the community. And if the community supports you, like you can just kind of jump in, you know? So yeah, if you still have doubts and you're not ready, yeah, you're never gonna be ready. And if you need more time to get ready, then take the time, right? I have a group of Gen Zers that have asked me to like mentor them. And they asked me a couple of weeks ago, right? And so we figured out a day, we figured out a time, and like I've waited and it's been like 3 weeks and they haven't figured out like when to start. And so today, after this episode, actually, I'm gonna hit them all up. I'm gonna say, okay, we got a day. I know on this day you're all free because you all said you were free on this day. I'm gonna send you a link, 11 o'clock. I'm gonna be ready to go. And those of you that want to jump in, because if I wait for them, it's never gonna happen. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like you're never gonna be ready. But like be around people that'll help you get ready. And so like, yeah, if I wait too long for the Gen Zers to like tell me, man, like we're never gonna meet. So I'm just gonna be like, this is the Wednesday, 11 o'clock. Here's the link. Jump on. And if you're ready to go, you're ready. And if you're not ready to go, that's fine. Like no judgment on my part. But yeah, man, if you're waiting to be ready, like you're never gonna be ready, just jump in.
You talk about the hard work of leading. What does that mean?
Well, leading has a lot of unknowns. Leading has a lot of criticisms and judgment from others. Sometimes it's dealing with law enforcement or a lawsuit. Sometimes it's talking with attorneys or accountants, or sometimes it's looking at P&L, P&L and budgets. And sometimes it's homework. You know what I mean? There's always more to do than you want to do as a leader. And that's hard. And not everyone can do it. And that's okay. But if you're willing to do the hard work of leadership and enter into a lot of unknowns, like then jump in, you can't start a job with 5 years experience. You got everybody start somewhere. So just jump in and start leading, learning about yourself and start learning about life.
Why do people avoid the hard internal work?
The hard internal work is hard.
Yeah.
But I think the bigger reason is people just don't know. That's why people go to see a therapist, and that's why people go get a coach and stuff. It's hard to think about yourself. The internal work is hard because you are where you are because of a reason. And if you want to get out of it, sometimes you need help. Many times you need help. So a mentor, a coach, maybe even a therapist, they're the ones that are going to help you through that. But internal work is not easy. Internal work is hard because it's facing things that you rather avoid. You know what I mean? It's you just listen to a comedian talk about like, I got a lot of stuff in my life, and I just put it off to the side and I just stuff it down, and that's just something natural and normal about that. And the reason why we stuff it down and put it off to the side is because it's hard work. It's emotionally taxing. It means you got to face some things. And so, but I think the strong leaders are the ones that can do that. And I think the secure identities and people that are secure in their stuff have worked through those kinds of things. Because if you don't face those kinds of things, man, you're just an insecure leader. You're going to be an insecure person. And I think facing those things and knowing those things makes you a little stronger.
Speaking of insecurity, what does it look like to lead when you're not 100% confident?
Yeah, I think depends on the leader. If you're humble enough to ask for help and get a mentor or get a coach or see a therapist, you can grow your confidence with the help of other people, right? But then if you're leading, even if, man, every leadership position that I've had, like I haven't had all the information, and you still have to somehow make a decision, right? And at the end of the day, you make your best decision with all the information that you have. And if you get it wrong, then you own it, and then you keep moving forward, and you keep looking, and you keep working, and you keep growing. And so when you're not 100% confident, I mean, like I said, like you never, I don't think you ever start with you're completely ready, because there's always something to learn, and always something to grow in. And so if you're not 100% confident, then be 80% confident, right? And then trust the skills and the principles to help you with the other 20%. Trust the community to help you with the other 20%. I think you can, but like knowing that you're at 80% is a good first step, right? Because then it helps you to figure out, okay, what do I need to do to get better? Which is what this whole podcast is.
Is it possible to ever fully get rid of all the lies, or do the great leaders just figure out a way to be better at moving through them?
Yeah, the way that I'm going to answer this is you're going to have to ask someone that's done all of that, because that's not me. I don't know how to answer that. Just to be honest, right? I'm still learning. Like I said, I'm still working through my identity scripts, right? And so like, is it possible to ever fully silence these lies? I think using my research on identity, I I think it's never possibly, I don't think you ever fully silence the lies, right? Because you might figure it out at this level, right? But then when you go to a deeper level and you have new things to figure it out, then there's just more nuance to that lie that you're going to have to work through. So the deeper you get into yourself, like the more you have to keep working at it because you're a different person. You're a wiser person. You're more mature. Then you'll have to work at it on that level. You see what I'm saying? So like the core lie, the core identity script or internal narrative could be there of like, I'm not good enough. But the further you get into your development, the further you get into yourself, the further you get into your identity, like, like nuance of it shows up and then you have to work through that. Right. And so, yeah, does it ever fully silence? I don't think so. But like, if you're a leader, like you are going to want to grow and work through those kind of
And what's the difference between someone who leads and someone who doesn't? Because everybody has fears.
the leader continues to grow and work through the fears and the other just continues to live in fear. Right. And so, yeah, that's the difference. The leader will continue to grow and work through it. And then someone who doesn't just lives in fear and they don't lead.
So let's help the audience reflect a little bit on their own barriers, on our own barriers. What's the one question every aspiring leader should be asking themselves?
Every aspiring leader, I think, why do you want to lead? I think that finding your why is a big deal. There are lots of authors, and I've heard you talk about finding your why. But, but finding your why, connecting it to why is a good first step. Yeah, that's what I would ask every aspiring leader, why? Why do you want to do this?
Yeah, I hear a lot of people talk about imposter syndrome, and you actually talk
Yeah,
about that a lot. So,
yeah.
what exactly is imposter syndrome for those who are listening and haven't heard it before? And how do you help leaders manage that?
Yeah. So the imposter syndrome is someone that fakes it, the other way to say it is, fake it till you make it, is as an imposter, somebody that plays a role and they just pretend to be that leader, they pretend to be that person. But what authors and psychologists are saying is you can fake it and you can be that imposter, but the more you do it, the better you get at it. The more you do it, you actually move into that you actually move into that role. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I've seen people fake it and not done the internal work, but they got lucky. There are a lot of leaders in leadership roles that just step into the role and they faked it and they just get lucky. You know what I mean? They make one lucky decision and then they're the leader for forever. I can think of a boss that you work for. You're a way better leader than that person, but they made one lucky decision. And even though you're the better leader, they're in charge. You know what I mean? So you work for them until you couldn't work for them any longer. You got your own role. It's the story, right? I mean, it's my story. It's your story. But yeah, imposter syndrome, like I think the way that I've seen it, it helps. Like you can fake it till you make it. And then, well, if you fake it and you don't make it, then you step out and you go do something else. But that's all a part of the leadership growing, learning.
So, for someone listening who feels stuck, what's a step that they could take today to confront these internal lies?
Man, it's probably the thing we say in every episode. It just kind of shows up. Write down what you think it is. Write it, reflect on it, evaluate it, take it to your therapist, take it to your mentor, take it to your coach. But there's something about like writing it down that makes it real. You know what I'm saying? Because you know what the internal narrative is, right? And if you take a moment to stop and think about it, and then when you write it down and then you share it with somebody, like then it's real, right? Because it's shared and it's written down. So write it down. Start there.
So, you're talking about journaling, reflecting. What are some things that people can do to uncover these blocks that they're dealing with, the things that are stopping them? What's something practical that they can practice?
Earlier I said start with your why, and I think the way that I do that, and we've shared it in this podcast before, but to write down your values. What are your values? What
Yeah.
are the things that are most important to you? Start with your values and then connect it to a vision statement. Who do you want to become? So once you have your values, once you have your vision of who you want to become, then start figuring out where you're at, right? This is where I'm at in light of my vision. And then write down the skills that you need in order get to that vision. And if you need help, hire a culture consultant from Rising Tide and we'll help you work through that, right? Take your DISC assessment to help you figure out your baseline personality foundation so that you know where you're at in order and then what you need to do in order to get to where you want to get. And so, I mean, start with any of those, but like write it down, get a mentor, start with your vision. Well, start with your values and then build toward your vision. One of the other things that I didn't say was like, what are your goals to get you to your vision? And then what are the dreams that are beyond those goals that can get you beyond your vision?
So for somebody who's on the edge, they're getting ready to step up, what are your final thoughts for those people?
Yeah. If you're right at the edge, jump, just go. Just let's lead. Let's just do it. I mean, it's all of those like, cute little phrases, but like they all work for the situation, man.
Yeah.
If you're, here's the deal. If you're moving toward it already and you're right at the edge, like you've already done all of this work, let's go. Find the people around you that are gonna help you, that are gonna be with you, that are gonna jump with you. Find somebody to jump with you. You know what I'm saying? But if you've already done all the work to get to the edge, you're never gonna be ready. So let's go. Let's jump.
And wise words. Dude, it's always good to have you on, man.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So for our audience, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and sign up for the newsletter. It's free and it gives you all the good stuff every month. Dr. Lem,
Yes,
we'll
sir.
be doing this again soon, man.
Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time. I always enjoy our conversations and I love that we get to share this and grow our leadership input. So thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next time.